The train from Stralsund to Binz rattles through Pomerania, and outside you watch the landscape shift, from flat farmland to gentle rolling hills, and finally to the sea. Rügen awaits you with its white chalk cliffs and secret beaches. It's January, bitterly cold, and you think of a woman you met there, with eyes like the sea itself. Her name is Rosa, and she's a winter beach gatherer, a treasure hunter, a woman who searches with light and patience for old riches. It's a fine name for what she does, walking along Rügen's shores with a small lamp, looking for amber, for golden light in the darkness. Amber is most precious in the cold months, you see, because in January, the wild storms of the Baltic hurl it ashore, through drifting ice and sea spray, emerging like small gifts, like signs from another time altogether. The sea gives it freely when it's in a rage, when the waves are so high they wash over the cliffs. Rosa is an old woman with white hair that escapes from under a green wool hat and whips about in the sea air. Her hands are large and brown, with big, gnarled knuckles, and her fingernails are often stained with sand and salt water, yellowed and amber dust. She moves along the beach like someone who's lived there for decades, like someone who knows where every stone lies, where every hollow dips, where the amber likes to hide itself, which coves, which cracks between the rocks, which depths of sand. You met her on a cold January morning, just as the sun was rising, painting the sky in greys and blues, a delicate play of light between night and day. She was already out with her lamp, an old oil lamp, possibly older than she was, giving off a gentle, warm glow like a candle flame. She told you that you can't search with those harsh electric torches, that the light's too sharp, too white and cold, that it blinds the amber and overpowers it. But with an oil lamp, she said, you can see it properly. You see its inner glow, the small flame burning within, the little sun from the time of dinosaurs. She showed you how it feels to hold amber in your hand. It's warm, even when you've held it for just a moment, though it's impossibly old. Rosa said that the piece you're holding could be 50 million years old, that it came from gigantic trees that no longer exist, from great dark forests that drowned in the sea and now lie at the bottom. Each piece of amber holds a piece of time captured, crystallized, preserved for eternity. Sometimes you find a small fly or spider or some other insect trapped inside, asleep in its golden coffin from millions of years, waiting for someone like Rosa to find it and honor it. Winter on Rügen's beaches is harsh and beautiful. The wind comes from the east, from Russia or somewhere even further, carrying the cold of vast plains with it. The sand freezes into tiny crystals that crunch like glass beneath your boots. The sea is grey and churning, and great waves crash against the chalk cliffs, wearing them down, carrying them away. Rosa doesn't only gather amber, though that's her first love. She collects fossils too, prehistoric things, ancient shells turned to stone, sometimes small bird or fish bones that died thousands of years ago and are now released again by the beach. She has a small collection at home, catalogued and dated as best she can. She said that in January, the beach gives up everything, all its secrets. It opens its graves. This happens because the waves are so wild. Because the storms are so furious that they churn everything up. Because nature itself releases the past for anyone willing to see it. She carries a small bag with her, filled with the amber she's found that morning, though it's still early and the day is just beginning. The largest pieces she sets aside to polish later and perhaps sell, for that's how she lives, from selling the finer specimens. But the smaller ones, the delicate, gentle pieces, those she keeps. She'll gather until her last day, for they're beyond price. She showed you her collection at home. Thousands of pieces, perhaps tens of thousands, each one neatly wrapped in tiny paper packets, each marked with a number and a date in her trembling, careful handwriting. She explained that each piece of amber has a story, that you can read them if you look carefully, if you gaze into their inner light. One piece might have come from a plant that grew in the age of dinosaurs, from ferns perhaps, from gigantic trees now turned to dust. Another might have trapped an insect that flew in the Cretaceous, a large beetle or a primitive fly, still lying there now in its body, preserved as if in a tomb. Rosa is a time traveler, without moving, without a machine, simply by walking along the beach and watching carefully. The amber shows her the secrets of millions of years. Snow fell lightly the whole while you were out with her. The chalk cliffs turned white, and the grey sea was scarcely distinguishable from the white sky. It was as though you were walking in a dream at the world's edge, where everything blurred together. But Rosa moved with certainty, her oil lamp in hand, searching for amber. She told you that she's been gathering every winter for 35 years now. She's watched the beaches change, seen new stones appear and old ones vanish. She's found pieces of amber the size of an egg and pieces no bigger than a grain of rice. Each one is a wonder, she said. Each one is a little sun trapped in time. You asked if she was ever sad, having spent so much of her life gathering amber, never stopping, never reaching an end. She laughed loudly, a rough, delighted laugh, and said she wasn't sad at all, that she found the question rather strange. She said it was her life, that this life fulfilled her, that she couldn't imagine living any other way. On some soft sofa, perhaps, in a warm room? No, that wasn't for her. The amber called her, winter after winter, to the beach, and she answered without hesitation. That's all you need, really, a calling and the strength to answer it. She'll keep going, Rosa, as long as her legs will carry her, as long as her eyes can see. She'll take the oil lamp and walk along the shore, and she'll find amber. The sea will give it to her, year after year, because she speaks the sea's language, because the sea is her family, because they belong together, the old woman and the old sea, both of them holding memories, both of them ancient. And when you sit on the train from Stralsund to Binz, when you look out over Rügen's landscape, when you can see the chalk cliffs, think of Rosa then. Think of the woman with the oil lamp, searching in January's darkness for treasure, for light, for memory. She's out there somewhere, perhaps at this very moment, while you're heading towards sleep. Rest yourself now, as amber rests in the earth. Your body is old, like the earth itself. Your thoughts as ancient as time. Sleep now, and let the waves rock you gently and safely to the shore of your dreams. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment, I thought. Just for a moment. But then pictures came behind my lids. Not clear pictures, just colors. Soft colors. Blue and gray, and a touch of gold from the lamp in the compartment. And these colors blended into something that wasn't quite seeing any longer, and wasn't yet dream. The train carried on, clack, 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 and each clack, clack seemed a bit further away, as though the train wasn't quite in the same space as me anymore, as though I were already half elsewhere, half in that place where tiredness lives, where everything becomes simple. My eyes grew heavy, so very heavy, as though someone had gently laid a warm hand across my eyelids and said, "Now it's good. Now it's enough for today." And I heard the train, clack, 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 and I heard the quiet breathing of another passenger already asleep, and I heard the distant rush of wind against the window panes, and all these sounds were like a soft blanket laid over me, layer upon layer, warmth upon warmth, until I felt nothing but the smooth glide of the train through the night. Come, listen carefully. I'll tell you about a woman whose old, experienced hands know how to weave spring itself. Her name is Ludmila, and she lives in South Moravia in the Czech Republic, in a small place. And her art is ancient, reaches back centuries. Ludmila is 79 years old, and her hands are no longer as quick as they once were, not as nimble. But perhaps they've grown more precise, more mature. She has an entire workshop full of materials, full of willow, dry, peeled willow, clean and pure, and grasses, precious spring grasses she gathers herself on her long walks. On a large wooden table stand bundles of materials, dozens of bundles, sorted carefully by length, by color, by thickness. Ludmila knows all these fine differences, can feel them with her fingers. The Easter palms, the palm branches she weaves, are no mere decoration. They're ceremony, history, tradition, faith. In South Moravia, they're carried into church on Palm Sunday. They're blessed by the priest. They're taken home and hung in the rooms. A few are gifts for family, but most are sold or given to the villagers. Ludmila's palm branches from 10 years ago, from 15 years ago, still hang in the houses of her neighbors, withered but precious. In spring, when the willows begin to put out new shoots, when the first green tips break out of dark buds, when nature awakens again, that's when Ludmila's year begins. She must cut the willows at exactly the right time, not too early when they're still too hard, not too late when they've already become woody. Timing is everything. Everything depends on it. She knows it in her bones, in her body, when the right time is. It's like an instinct, a feel, a connection to nature. Her route leads from Olomouc to Brno, about 100 kilometers. But she doesn't make this journey because of the distance, not for practical reasons. She travels slowly, observing, to find the best willows, to gather the most beautiful materials. There are special, secret places, special marshes and riverbanks where the willows are particularly supple, where the light falls particularly beautifully. Her family has known these places for generations, for perhaps 100 years. The 1st of March is her sacred day, her anchor. That's when she begins to wander and observe, to look attentively. The fruit trees in South Moravian gardens begin to bloom slowly. The apple trees turn white and delicate pink. The pear trees glow. Life everywhere, awakening everywhere. She goes with her long knife in her pockets and searches for young shoots, soft enough for weaving, but already strong enough to be durable, to last a long time. In the 2nd week of March, she begins to cut. With her long, very sharp knife, which she's had for 30 years, which she inherited from her mother, she cuts the willows to exactly the right length, again and again, the whole week. She needs long pieces for the structural base, the stable, the strong ones. Shorter, thinner ones for the decoration, for the beauty, for the details. The church bells ring loud and clear across the broad plain as she cuts, from early morning until late afternoon, and it's a soothing sound that underscores the rhythm of her work. Cut, cut, cut. Always the same rhythm, always the same patience. Then comes the peeling, an important process. She boils the willows in large copper pots with water, not for long, just long enough to soften the bark, to soften it. Then she peels the bark away with her hand and a thin knife, and the willows become bare and pale and shiny as glass. That's the true art, preparing these willows in their pure state. She gathers the grasses at the end of March, when the first truly warm days come. She goes to the meadows she's known for decades and gathers very carefully certain grasses, feather grasses, which are delicate and white, and others that are greener, have livelier color. She gathers them early in the morning when they're still damp with dew, because that makes them more supple, more flexible. Her large baskets are full when she comes home in the evening. The weaving itself is the true heart of the work, the soul of tradition. Ludmila sits in her bright workshop, where the light comes from the east and illuminates everything, gently, warmly, and her old hands, which have done this 100 times, begin to work. The willows are woven carefully, with great attention. The grasses are worked in, become part of the whole, and slowly, very slowly, hour after hour, something beautiful emerges, something worthy, something that has eternity in it. No two are the same. Each palm branch is individual, different, has its own face, its own personality, its own character. That's what's important. That's the true art. She thinks a great deal while weaving. Her thoughts wander. She thinks of the women before her, her grandmother, her mother, her great-grandmother, who did the same, who made the same almost identical work, perhaps 100 years ago, perhaps 200 years ago. She thinks of the old, strong hands that passed these special techniques to her, that literally taught her everything. Weaving is prayer for Ludmila, is meditation, is love for tradition, is history in her hands. Every palm branch is a letter to the future, a gift to the next generation. 2 weeks before Palm Sunday, she has woven about 100 beautiful individual palm branches by hand, with patience. Some she sells for little money to poor families. Some she simply gives away to the church. Her daughter and her granddaughter will carry some of them to church, will hold them proudly high at the priest's blessing. That's true continuity. That's history continuing, not breaking off. Ludmilla sometimes thinks that when she's no longer here, perhaps someone else will continue this tradition. Perhaps her granddaughter will learn this art. But she doesn't know. For now, that's enough. For now, there are these 100 palm branches. On the day before Palm Sunday, she stands in the cold church and looks at the palm branches she's made herself. They're beautiful. They're worthy. They're art. The priest blesses them all together, and Ludmilla weeps a bit. Not from sorrow, but from the deep knowledge that she's preserved the tradition, that she's a true artist, even if the modern world might not understand that. After the blessing, the people leave the church, holding their palm branches proudly, almost reverently. Ludmilla's palm branches will hang on walls, will be blessings, will be protection, will be history. Ludmilla knows some of these houses. She's been inside them, has seen how her earlier palm branches hang, faded but precious, loved, respected. She sits on a bench beside the church and looks at the people. She sees her daughter with her grandchildren, all with palm branches. She sees the whole community, all with their palm branches. That's continuity, thinks Ludmilla. That's true tradition, still alive, not dead. Not like so much else in this modern world. A young man approaches her. A grandson of a grandson, perhaps, or simply someone from the village. "Thank you, Ludmilla," he says simply. "The palm branches are beautiful. They're as beautiful as always." Ludmilla nods. She says nothing, but her eyes are moist. That's the best compliment, the best thanks she can receive. The tradition lives on. The art lives on. And the night after Palm Sunday, Ludmilla falls asleep peacefully, knowing that the palm branches go into homes, that they'll bring blessings, that she's brought true beauty into the world. Her hands did that. Her old hands still brought art. And so we travelled on, the train and I and the few other passengers who sat with me in the compartment or in neighbouring ones, each in their own little corner of the world, each on their own path toward sleep. The warmth of the carriage, the quiet crackle of the heating, the clack of wheels on the rails, all of it became a single song, a song without words, a song that carries you and soothes you and says, "You may let go now. You may rest now." The train travels on for you. Time travels on for you. The world sorts itself out while you sleep. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I still thought, other people are sleeping now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them, and the moon looks down on us, and everything is in its place. The fields are in their place, the forests are in their place, the rivers are in their place, and I am in my place, here in this carriage, here in this warm cradle of wood and fabric and metal that carries me where I need to go, without my having to be awake, without my having to do anything but trust and rest. Lean back and relax. I'll tell you about the last shepherd. A very old man named Gjorge, and he wanders with his great herds over the wild mountains of Transylvania, the way his ancestors did 100 years ago, the way his great-grandfathers did. Gheorghe is 83 years old, and his body is hard as the mountains he's climbed his whole life, bone-hard, weathered. He's of the clan of Wallachian shepherds, a family with ancient tradition, reaching back 1,000 years or more, reaching into mythology. The sheep know him. They know his call, his movements. The dogs know him, and the mountain itself knows him. He's part of this landscape, an integral part, not just someone passing through. Spring is the time of great preparation, of movement, of migration. Winter is finally over. The snow-covered peaks of the higher plains slowly melt into their lower green heights. It's time to move the great herds, to take them from the lower, flat grazing lands of the foothills up to the higher pastures where new grasses grow, where life after a long, hard winter explodes again in green force. His route has been the same for 40 years, proven, perfected. From Sibiu to Alba Iulia, but not the direct modern route. Gheorghe takes the old, traditional shepherd's route, which leads through the mountains, over high plateaus, through old, quiet villages, past old churches with crosses, where church bells ring across wide plains like voices of God. It's only about 80 kilometers as the crow flies, but with the great herd, it takes 2 full weeks. Preparation begins in late January, in February, when there's still much snow on the mountains. Gheorghe checks his sheep meticulously, methodically, looks at their hooves, their fleece, their health, every single sheep. He has about 400 sheep, a whole herd, and he knows literally every single one, knows their names, knows which mother they have, knows which are strong, which are weaker, which might perhaps have their first lambs this year. That's not sentimentality. That's real, deep knowledge, real practical expertise, which you can only learn by living, through decades. A good shepherd knows his herd the way a doctor knows his own body, the way an artist knows all his colors. The dogs, old, trusted dogs, large white Carpathian shepherd dogs, powerful and self-assured, have been ready for a long time. They've worked for many years, perhaps 2 decades, with Gheorghe. These special dogs that are his, that belong only to him. They understand his special calls, his exact gestures, his movements. They're not merely dogs. They're true partners, our family, are his life. Gheorghe has lived with them his whole life, has learned to speak with them in their language, their logic, and they understand him perfectly, better than most people would. Late March is the time. The first truly warm days are here. The fruit trees are beginning to bloom luxuriantly. The air smells strongly of freshly plowed earth and of clear snowmelt from the higher peaks. Gheorghe packs his small equipment together, his long shepherd's staff, his old shepherd's hat, his thick sheepskin cloak. He doesn't have much with him. A shepherd doesn't need much, just what's necessary. The first day of the great, important journey is short. It leads the great herd from the flat, level plain up to the foot of the mountains. The sheep are nervous, excited. They haven't walked in a long time, have been for a long time in the lower, flat plains. Gheorghe is patient, as always, as his whole life has been. He calls them with special sounds, with his shepherd's voice. The dogs work with all their strength and intelligence, and slowly, very slowly, The great, magnificent herd moves like a living river up the first small, important incline. At night, the sheep sleep under the open sky, under the stars. The dogs keep watch. Gheorghe sits by the fire he's made and eats his dark bread and his strong cheese. The sky is full of stars, infinitely many. The air is so clear, you feel insignificant against this cosmic infinity. He thinks of his life, of all the decades he's done this, of his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather who did the same. On the second day, he climbs higher, ever higher. The grasshoppers chirp loudly, although it's not yet really warm, still cool. He sees the first swallows flying back from the south, the black flyers. A good sign. It will be a good spring, a very good one even. The fruit trees in the small villages he passes bloom luxuriantly and beautifully, white and delicate pink, as though someone had consciously decorated the mountains with blossoms. The path is steep, very steep, but the sheep are strong, bred for these hills for 100 generations. They may not remember the way after a long winter away, but their bodies remember instinctively. Gheorghe leads them patiently. The dogs lead the slower ones upward. On the fourth day, they've finally arrived at the first high plateau, an important milestone. The pastures are still brown, still winter-colored, still exhausted. But green is breaking through everywhere. Everywhere, hope. Gheorghe sees with his experienced eye that vegetation will soon explode into green force, into new life. In a week, this field will be completely green, luxuriantly green. It's wonderful to see. It's the best sign for a good summer. The herd can stay here a few days and eat, can rest, while he plans, at night, awake under the stars, how to continue, which route is best, where the best grasses still grow higher up. The next days are slower, more hilly, more deliberate. The weather is changeable, alternating, sometimes sun, sometimes cold rain. The sheep are in their elements now. They eat joyfully. They're happy. Gheorghe sits with his staff and watches everything. His old eyes are everywhere at once. He sees everything. A wolf? No. A predator? No. Everything is good. Everything is safe. On the 10th night, they're almost there. The higher pastures are close, where the best grasses grow in whole fields, where his beloved herd will spend the whole summer. Gheorghe looks at the mountains he's known his whole life and knows with certainty that everything is right. The year has truly begun. The mountains have become full again. The herd has arrived at the top. The story continues. The last nights on the way are cold, but Gheorghe sleeps well, sleeps deeply as always. The sheep are quiet. The dogs keep watch. The mountains are close. He can see the higher peaks, still snow-covered, but melting. The white will turn green in a few weeks. On the last morning, when they truly arrive on the highest pastures, Gheorghe sits down and watches the herd. They eat. They're happy. They're at home. The shepherd clans have used these mountains for 1,000 years or more. This continuity is not just tradition. It's the deepest knowledge that one is safe here, that the mountains are known, that the pastures are productive. A few other shepherds are also there with their herds. They greet George with great respect. He's the oldest, the most experienced, the last, perhaps, of the old school. They speak little, but there's understanding between them. They all do the same. All have the same mission: to protect the herds, to live the tradition. And that night, by the warm campfire under the stars, George falls asleep, like a man who knows exactly that he's fulfilled his sacred task. The herd is safe. The mountains are ready. The tradition still lives. It hasn't died. The train rolled gently onward, and outside the world was now completely dark. Only a few lights in the distance, solitary windows where other people, too, were settling to rest. I thought about how many people in the world at this moment were falling asleep, each in their own bed, in their own compartment, in their own room, and how we were all part of one great, quiet movement, a movement into sleep. The rhythm of wheels on rails, ta-dum, 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 was like the breathing of some great, friendly creature, carrying us all together through the darkness, through time. And as the train continued through the night, ta-dum, ta-dum, I noticed how my thoughts grew slower, how the images in my head grew softer, how the edges blurred. The voices I'd heard became a gentle hum, a hum like distant bees, or like an old song heard as a child and now not quite remembered. The warm air current in the compartment wrapped itself around me like a blanket, and I felt how my shoulders very slowly sank downward, how the tension of the day fell from me, piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without hurry, without sorrow. The journey from Trier to Buoy in autumn. The Moselle lies to the left and the sun hung low, orange like liquid light over the vineyards where the grapes had long since been picked. A man boarded, in his mid-60s, his skin tanned from summer and from being outdoors, a face weathered like old leather, eyes wise and calm, large weathered hands, fingernails darkened by a life outside. He wore a shirt that might once have been white, but now it had a stain on the left side of the collar, dark red, dry, like wine, or perhaps like the residue from grape skins, something you don't wash out because it's part of the work. I greeted him politely, and he nodded, sat down across from me and sighed. A deep, good sigh, like when you finally sit down after being on your feet all day. His gaze fell on the Moselle outside, and a half smile came into his face. I asked him, without knowing why, whether he was from here. He looked at me and said yes, that he had an estate here, up on the slope where the best grapes grew. It was harvest time just now, and he was heading to Buoy to discuss something technical with another Vintner. Then he began to talk, and he spoke in that slow, thoughtful way some people speak who are used to listening rather than talking. But when they do speak, every word carries weight. He told me about wine, not about prices or awards, but about the grapes themselves, how they tasted in this particular year, different from other years, sweeter because of the heat in August, but with exactly the right level of acidity. He spoke of the soil composition, of how important it was to know where water seeps through and where it remains. He'd just pressed them, he said, put the grapes into the press, and let the juice run out, hour after hour, until not a drop came. It was like a ritual he repeated every autumn, all his life. First learned from his father, who himself had been shown it by his father, then performed with his own hands, and perhaps one day his son would do it. Or perhaps not. But it didn't matter. The work was there, and it had to be done. He described the color of the must before fermentation began. Not dark red, but that violet brown that looked almost greenish in certain light. He spoke of counting the days until fermentation ended, of waiting, of trusting that nature would do its work. There was a patience in him, you understand, that wasn't tired, but active. He didn't simply wait, but paid attention to temperatures, to the smallest signs of mold or disease, to the smell of Moselle wine when you lifted the lid. And as he told me how you turn the barrels, how you check whether the wine is clear or still cloudy, how you know when it's time to filter the wine, as he spoke of this, something shimmer in his eyes that wasn't passion, but something quieter. A form of love expressed through small gestures, not grand words. He spoke of autumn mornings when mist lay over the Moselle, and the workers methodically picked grapes into their baskets, without hurrying, because hurrying harms the grapes. The fruit must be treated gently, or the juice begins to flow, and everything is lost. He spoke of the midday sun illuminating the vines while the last batch was harvested, and how the scent of grapes hung in the air, sweet and dense, fulfilling. His hands, as he spoke, moved slowly, as though mimicking the movements of the work, grasping, pulling, laying down again and again, the same gestures that have shaped his whole life. His voice was dark and rough, with a slight Moselle dialect that made the words warmer, gave them weight. In his eyes I saw no tiredness, though he'd just had long days behind him. I saw something else. Contentment, but not in the sense of rest, but in the sense of wholeness. And then his station came. Buoy wasn't far now, and he made ready to leave. I said goodbye, and he nodded, stood up, and his shirt pulled a little across his shoulders, and I saw once more that stain on his collar, that dried trace of grape or earth. The train stopped, and he was gone. I leaned back in my seat, and something strange happened. Suddenly, I understood, in a moment of clarity, what he had given me without knowing. A life bound to grapes and soil and seasons. A life in which you do the same things every day can seem small if you view it from outside, if you think there are more important things to do. But it's not small. It's the opposite. A life so wholly concentrated on one single thing, on knowing that thing, on paying attention to every detail, on patient waiting. That's not a small life. That's a whole, fulfilled life. Because the man who lives it is completely absorbed in it. I sank back in my seat and looked out at the Moselle, still lying like liquid gold in the autumn light. And I thought of the barrels in that man's cellar, of the wine fermenting and waiting and becoming, and of the hands that have overseen the process year after year, century after century. Imagine yourself sitting on the train from Cuxhaven to Hamburg, and outside the North German coast slides past. The lights of evening stain the sky in grey and dark blue. You think of someone you've just visited, a woman whose story runs like an invisible thread through your memory. The Lighthouse Keeper on Helgoland is called Margareta, and her life is devoted to light. Not the ordinary light most people see daily, but the great rotating beam that sweeps across the North Sea every night from 100 meters up. In winter, when the days barely last 3 hours and the nights seem endless, Margareta is the guardian of a light that keeps sailors away from the rocks. You visited her there, in her small, warm room beside the great tower. She told you how it feels when the storm comes from the Atlantic, and the wind howls so loudly you can't hear your own thoughts. The storm isn't wicked, she said. It's simply confident. It knows it's the strongest force in that moment, and it shows it. Margareta is an old woman with eyes like the sea, gray, deep, and full of secrets. She spent 40 years on Helgoland, 40 winters, in which every evening she's climbed upstairs to check the lamps, to clean the lenses, and make sure the light is burning. Some people would have longed to leave that island, but Margareta never did. She said that she's grown into Helgoland, that her roots sit deep in the rocks. In winter, the work is particularly important. Ships are more careful then, but also more desperate. Sailors need the light like they need a friend to anchor them in darkness. They need it the way a child needs their mother's hand. Margareta understood this deep in her heart, and that's why she was proud of her work, even though nobody knew her, even though nobody knew her name. Margareta showed you the mechanism, the great lenses of ground glass that concentrate and amplify the light. They were warm from the lamp, and their surfaces were so smooth you could see your face reflected in them, distorted but clear. She cleaned them every morning with slow, careful movements, as though washing a baby. She needed special cloths, which she sews herself from cotton so nothing scratches the glass. She told you that the lenses came from France, that they might be 100 years old, that other hands before hers had already cleaned them, other women, other keepers, all in the same tradition, with the same care. The small flat below the tower is simple but comfortable. There's a stove that burns constantly, black coal giving off heat and a deep, soothing purr. The walls are whitewashed, and there are few pictures on them, but the pictures that are there all show the sea. White curtains hang at the windows, filtering the cold light from outside and transforming it into a gentle, milky grey. Margareta had made tea for you, a blend of herbs she dries herself. It tasted of thyme, of chamomile, and of sea salt. The cup warmed your hands, and you could feel how the heat slowly flowed into your body and relaxed you. She told you that every night before sleeping she goes upstairs to turn on the light. That's her final task of the day, her most sacred task, before darkness completely falls and night begins. She takes the old metal ladder leading upward, step by step, with a lamp in her hand, because it's dark up there. She doesn't use the lift, even though there is one. She prefers the stairs, because then she has time to prepare. When she reaches the lamp room, she turns a great switch and a quiet humming sounds. Then the light begins to rotate, slowly and majestically, like the pendulum of a clock, like the island's heartbeat. A moment of suspense, then it's there, the light. the greatest light on this island. And Margareta can go to sleep, can rest, because she knows she's fulfilled her duty, that she's kept her promise to the sea and the ships. Winter on Helgoland is rough and unforgiving. The wind comes from the north and carries the taste of ice and distant lands with it, perhaps from Greenland, from the polar regions. It whistles around the corners of the lighthouse and howls in the crevices. The sand on the beach gleams like glass when frost has frozen it, and it crunches under boots like little crystals. The seagulls are less numerous in winter, but those that remain cry louder, as though fighting against the silence, against loneliness, against the eternal darkness. They cry desperately, seeking, hoping someone will answer. Margareta often stood at her window and watched them, and she understood their cries. She told you of one night when a ship was in a storm. She saw it on the radar screen. Yes, Helgoland has modern things too. And she saw the lighthouse beams striking the waves again and again at regular intervals. The ship came past, safely, guided by the light. The next morning the captain called and thanked her. He said the light had saved them. His words moved Margareta so much that she had to weep. The train rattles on through the dark night, and you close your eyes. You see the lighthouse beam in front of you, the great rotating light that's the same every night and yet different every night, because the sea changes and the ships take different routes and new people venture out. Margareta will go upstairs again tomorrow, climb the stairs and turn on the light. She's alone on Helgoland, but not lonely. The light is her company, and the ships are her family. She doesn't write them letters, and they don't write her, but they understand each other because they all need the same thing: a reason to keep going in the darkness, a reason not to lose hope. The lamp below the tower burns all night, and Margareta sleeps peacefully, knowing that the great light rotates above the sea. In the morning, the sun will rise, grey and weak, and she'll go upstairs to turn off the lamp. Then she'll continue her routine, checking, cleaning, waiting, hoping. That's her life. You imagine what it feels like to live in one place so long that you become part of it. Margareta is now part of Helgoland, just like the lighthouse, just like the light. She doesn't know where she ends and where the island begins. And perhaps that's not a bad thing. Perhaps that's exactly what a life means: to give yourself so completely to a place that you merge with it. Marguerite also told you about her routine, about the small things she did every day. She woke at 5 o'clock, made herself coffee, looked out at the sea. She cleaned the lamps, checked the mechanisms, read in old logbooks of other keepers who'd been here before her. She knew their names, their handwriting, their thoughts. They were her predecessors, her teachers, her companions in time. She said that the lighthouse was a living being, that it breathed, that it felt. The stairs were its veins, the lamp its heart. In a storm you could hear its suffering, in spring its joy. She loved this tower the way a mother loves her children, unconditionally, completely. The train travels onward. Hamburg approaches with its lights and houses, with people and life. But in your head, you still see the lighthouse on Helgeland, the great rotating beam sweeping across the North Sea at this very moment. Protective, reliable, unchanging. And you know that Margarita is there, in her tower, and that she'll get up tomorrow and turn on the light again. That gives you peace. That gives you security. Sleep now, peacefully and safely, like a ship that sees the light. The light watches over you, and soon the night will be past. Rest and dream of the sea and the light. And so we travelled on, the train and I, and the few other passengers who sat with me in the compartment or in neighbouring ones, each in their own little corner of the world, each on their own path towards sleep. The warmth of the carriage, the quiet crackle of the heating, the clack of wheels on the rails, all of it became a single song, a song without words, a song that carries you and soothes you and says, "You may let go now. You may rest now." The train travels on for you. Time travels on for you. The world sorts itself out while you sleep. The train from Stralsund to Greifswald travels slowly through the Mecklenburg landscape, and outside you see the Bodden bays shimmer like thin glass in the winter sun. This area is both magical and melancholic, and you think of a woman you met there, a bird watcher with an unusual name. Her name is Sabine, but everyone calls her the ice diver watcher, though she has a fine, delicate face and gentle hands. She doesn't hunt with weapons, but with patience and a good pair of binoculars. Her target is the great northern divers, rare birds that come from the north in winter and stay in the Bodden waters to overwinter. Only she knows how to find them, where to photograph and document them, so that other scientists understand how these birds are doing. You met Sabine on a cold morning at one of the observation huts on the Bodden shore. She was already there, though the sun had just risen, and the sky shifted from dark blue to delicate orange. She stood motionless, with her binoculars around her neck and a thick notebook in her hand, gazing only out at the bay. She wore a black wool hat with single blonde strands escaping, and a green parka with so many pockets you could fit a whole life in them. The pockets were filled with index cards, with camera batteries, with a thermometer, with pencils, with everything an observer needed. She explained to you that the great northern divers are very rare, that there are only a few hundred specimens left in Europe. You have to be lucky to see them, and you also have to know where they are. Most people drive past these waters on the road that runs along the Bodden, and don't notice at all that down there, in a particular bay, beneath the ice floes and the towering rows of old fishing boats, these wonderfully beautiful, majestic birds live and overwinter. But Sabine knows it. She's known it for 10 years, and she watches over them like a mother watches over her children, with devotion and eternal love. Winter is the best time for her work, although it's also the hardest, the coldest, the loneliest time. In winter, when the Bodden shore begins to freeze, when temperatures drop below -10 at night and sometimes reach -20, and the wind is so ice cold it hurts to breathe, that tears come to your eyes. That's when they come. That's when the great northern divers arrive from the north to overwinter. to find fish in the relatively warm Bodden waters. They need the icy waters, the clear conditions, the open water between ice flows. Sabine goes out then, puts on several layers, brings her equipment, and sits in her small hut on the shore and waits. Waits with the patience of someone who knows that waiting is an art form. She showed you the hut, a simple construction of wood and metal, with a tiny window through which you can see the bay. Inside it's cold, but less cold than outside. She has a small thermos of coffee and a couple of blankets. She said that she sometimes sits for hours without seeing anything, and then, suddenly, one appears. The great northern divers are majestic birds, royal and proud. They have a black throat, a white belly, and white spots on the black breast that look like snowflakes, like stars from another sky. They're larger than you'd think, at least 60 centimeters, some even larger. And when they move like dancers, elegant and precise, full of grace. They dive beneath the surface, sometimes for a minute or longer, and you can see how the water closes over their black and white backs. Then, there's a long period of silence, just wind and waves. And suddenly, unexpectedly, they surface again, sometimes far away, sometimes very close. And when they surface again, Sabine presses the camera shutter in a flash. She's taken thousands of photographs, each one a small meditation, each one a moment when nature reveals its secret. She shows you an album with her best shots, and you see in it a whole world you didn't know before. The birds' eyes are red and wild, their movements precise and predictable. Sabine's been a great northern diver watcher for 10 years, but she says she still has much to learn, that the birds surprise her, that there are new things every year. She works with ornithologists, bird experts from various universities, serious people who love the same things she does, the birds. Together, they document how many great northern divers there are this season, which areas they prefer, how long they stay, where they nest, where they hunt for food. This information is incredibly important for nature conservation, for understanding how climate affects these rare birds, how humans change their world, for better or worse. The wind came from the sea over the frozen waters, and Sabine stood motionless, her binoculars to her eye, her breath turning into little clouds that disappeared immediately in the cold air. The snow crunched under her boots, though she walked as quietly as possible. She told you that the birds are very shy, that you must approach them slowly, that you must understand their language. She knew every bird in this bay, every single specimen, every tiny peculiarity. She called them by names, even though the names were only meaningful to her, even though no one else would understand these names. There was, for example, the old coral. That's what she called the first bird she ever photographed 10 years ago. A large, impressive bird with a black throat and white belly. And Marta, a female bird whom Sabine only saw on certain days in a certain corner of the bay, always at the same time, with the same regularity as a train. And the little Hans, the youngest bird, who always appeared first in the morning, as though he'd been the first to survive the night and wanted to wake the others. The train rattles on, and you close your eyes. You see Sabine in front of you, sitting in her small hut, her eyes behind the binoculars, her fingers on the camera shutter. You see the great northern divers, diving beneath the surface and surfacing again, again and again, day after day, winter after winter. Sabine told you that she sometimes travels to Greenland in the summer months to observe the great northern divers in their summer quarters. She does this at her own expense, with her own money, because her love for these birds is stronger than any financial concern. She has a small flat near the Bodden, but she spends more time in her hut than at home. An ornithologist she works with once told you that Sabine is the best observer he's ever met. She has not only technical skills, but also a kind of spiritual connection to the birds. She knows what they think, what they feel, before they do it. That's rare. Very rare. Sabine will continue, even when winter ends and the great northern divers return north to their distant summer habitats. She'll evaluate her photographs, organize her notes, send her data to the universities. She'll share new findings with other observers. And next winter, she'll be here again, in her hut on the Bodden shore, and she'll wait, patiently and lovingly, until the great northern divers return. That's her life's task, and she fulfills it with her whole soul. Let yourself glide now, the way the great northern divers glide beneath the water. Trust the current. Let go and lose yourself in the depths of sleep. Your eyes grow heavy, like the eyes of the birds diving in the Bodden waters at this very moment. And so we travelled on, the train and I, and the few other passengers who sat with me in the compartment or in neighbouring ones, each in their own little corner of the world, each on their own path toward sleep. The warmth of the carriage, the quiet crackle of the heating, the clack of wheels on the rails, all of it became a single song, a song without words, a song that carries you and soothes you and says, "You may let go now. You may rest now." The train travels on for you. Time travels on for you. The world sorts itself out while you sleep. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I still thought, other people are sleeping now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them, and the moon looks down on us. And everything is in its place. The fields are in their place. The forests are in their place. The rivers are in their place. And I am in my place, here in this carriage, here in this warm cradle of wood and fabric and metal that carries me where I need to go without my having to be awake, without my having to do anything but trust and rest. The train from Jever to Wilhelmshaven travels through flat, green landscapes, past red brick houses and meadows where only a few sheep graze in winter. It's a stylish, melancholic route, and you think of a small village in Friesland you visited, and of a woman named Ilse. Ilse is a candle maker, but not like other candle makers who melt wax and pour it into molds mechanically without feeling. Ilse has her own method, her own story, which winds through the winters of her kitchen like smoke of the soul, a story of devotion and love for the material. She collects wax, but not just any wax. She collects the wax of old ships, precious, salty wax that has accumulated for decades on the hulls and in the dark warehouses of ports. This wax isn't pure, it isn't white and uniform, but it's genuine. It's filled with spirit. You found Ilse in her house, an old Frisian house with low ceilings and thick walls that hold heat. The kitchen was her realm, a realm full of scents and colors, full of glass and containers holding all kinds of wax and oil. But what was special was the material. She showed you large boxes filled with grey-green, salty wax that she'd painstakingly removed from old ship hulls. She explained to you that this wax carries history, that it's not just material, but a kind of memory. It comes from ships that were everywhere in the world, that experienced terrible storms and long, still calms, that saw generations of sailors, music and laughter, and also sadness and death. The wax was there, absorbing smells, salt, fog. With every ship Ilse worked on, she was part of its story, its journey between beginning and end. She was a kind of medium, an artist who transformed the ship's memories into something new, into candles that give light. Winter is the best time for Ilse's work. When the cold settles in, the wax becomes brittle and ready to melt. She brings the boxes into her warm kitchen and begins to clean the wax carefully. She removes sand and salt, sometimes also small shells or bubbles of algae that have settled in it over years. Then she melts it slowly, very slowly, over a gentle fire. The melting is like music, like a ritual she's practiced for 40 years. Ilse sits in her kitchen with a thick cotton shawl around her neck and stirs again and again, slowly, meditatively, as though speaking an ancient incantation. It takes her hours, sometimes the whole day, and while she stirs, she thinks of the ships, thinks of the sailors, thinks of all the lives contained in this wax. She says you have to feel the wax, that you have to listen to its fine voice, that you have to understand its mood. Otherwise it ends up grey and ugly, lifeless and cold, instead of golden and warm, full of soul. When the wax is ready, she adds collected sea salt, tiny, sparkling crystals from the beach that shine like diamonds, and sometimes scents too, only rarely, only when it feels right. She loved adding essential oil of fir, the resin of a tree that also grows by the sea, and sometimes a hint of lemon or orange to give warmth. But the main scent was always the scent of the sea itself, the rich, salty, deep scent of the Baltic that was locked in the wax that had been stored there over decades. She only needed to warm the wax, only to raise the temperature for it to emerge, to spread like a bird learning to fly. She showed you how she formed the candles, a fascinating process. She poured the liquid wax into old watering cans or containers she'd collected. Sometimes they were old tea tins, sometimes even shells or small clay vessels she found on the beach. Each container was different, had its own shape, its own size. Then she let it cool and harden, slowly, very slowly, over hours or days, so no cracks would form, so the wax would set evenly. The result was candles that didn't look like normal mass-produced candles, but like little works of art, like sculptures, like objects from another world. Each was different, each unique. Each carried its own story within it. Ilse doesn't sell these candles. That was the beautiful thing about it. She made them for people who came to her, people who needed their story. She gave them at Christmas, at weddings, at funerals. She said that such a candle doesn't just give light, but also memory. You asked her why she did this, why she took this trouble. She answered with a story. She told of a ship from which she'd taken the wax, an old cargo vessel from the 19th century that had been broken up in Wilhelmshaven. This ship had made 1,000 voyages, had carried hundreds of people, had survived storms and witnessed wars. The captain, whose name was still carved on the ship, had been dead for a long time. But his ship lived on, in the wax, in the candles Ilse made. The wind howled outside, and in the kitchen it was warm and full of scent. You watched Ilse, how with her old hands she stirred the wax, her eyes concentrated and full of love. She wasn't alone in her work, she said. She was accompanied by all the ships, by all the sailors, by all the history she held in her hands. You asked her if she ever knew which ship each candle came from. She laughed quietly and said that she knew because she spoke with the wax, daily, for hours. Each piece had its own voice, its rhythm, its color, its own memory. When she warmed it, it remembered, and Ilse remembered with it. She said that wax never lies, that it carries truth within it. She showed you a book she kept, in which she described every ship from which she'd obtained wax. There were hundreds of entries, densely written in her trembling handwriting, with names, with dates, with stories. She'd researched, had searched through old harbor registers, had found descendants of sailors and spoken with them, had collected photographs of ships, of captains. Each ship was real to her, alive, present, as though it were still sailing, still existing in another dimension. She showed you a special candle, greenish gold, which she'd made years ago. It came from a sailing ship from the 17th century that she'd found in a shipyard. The ship was famous, had sailed with great explorers, had reached continents that other people had never seen. When Ilse melted the wax, she could feel that it was different, that it had a different weight, a different memory. The candle maker from the Frisian village will continue, even as she grows older, as long as her hands can work, as long as she has strength in her arms. She'll collect wax, melt it, make candles, and each candle will be a small monument, a quiet tribute to all the ships, to all the people who lived and died, to all the journeys that were undertaken. These candles aren't for profit, aren't for sale. They're for remembrance, for veneration, for love of life itself. Sleep now, sheltered and warm, as in a kitchen in Friesland. Let the warmth of the candles penetrate you, the light that speaks of 1,000 journeys. Rest in this warmth and trust the stories the wax tells you. The train ran through a tunnel, and for a brief moment it was completely dark outside. Just the rushing sound, just the echo of wheels on tunnel walls. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And then we were out again, and the night wrapped itself around us once more, like a mother gathering her child back into her arms after a short outing. I thought how beautiful that is. Tunnel and night, and tunnel again, and night again. On and on, on and on. And after a while, you stop knowing what's outside and what's inside, because everything flows into everything, because it all becomes one, because sleep is so near, You can almost smell it. And as the train continued through the night, to dun, I noticed how my thoughts grew slower, how the images in my head grew softer, how the edges blurred. The voices I'd heard became a gentle hum, a hum like distant bees, or like an old song heard as a child and now not quite remembered. The warm air current in the compartment wrapped itself around me like a blanket, and I felt how my shoulders very slowly sank downward, how the tension of the day fell from me, piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without hurry, without sorrow. The train from Emden to Borkum doesn't take long, for Emden is already close to the sea, and from there you take the ferry out to the island. You sit at the window, watching the landscape flatten, the green meadows give way, and the sea begin. You think of a woman you met there, a woman whose name you've nearly forgotten, but whose story stays. Her name is Hannah, and she's a buoy keeper. It's an unusual profession. Few people know of it, and even fewer understand why it matters. But Hannah knows, and the ships on the North Sea know it too. She's responsible for maintaining the buoys and markers that stand in the water before Borkum, that show ships where it's safe and where the rocks lurk. You met Hannah on Borkum itself, on that tiny little island which in winter juts into the rough sea like the point of a sword. She's a middle-aged woman with short grey hair and eyes that have seen the sea 1,000 times over. She wears a thick wool jumper and work trousers, and her hands are rough and sore from her labor. She told you at length about her work, how she goes out regularly in a small boat to check and maintain the buoys. Each one is a little column painted red and white so you can see it in any weather, with a lamp on top that burns at night and a bell that rings in the breakers like a call. These buoys are the only things that tell the ships with certainty where they can sail safely, where the rocks are hidden. Without them, there would be too many accidents, too many wrecks, too many lost ships and lost lives. Winter is the hardest time for Hannah, the most dangerous, the coldest. The sea is wild and black as night. The waves are high, sometimes 5 or 6 meters, sometimes more. The little boat she uses is old and rust-spotted, but it's well built, with thick wood and strong ropes. Hannah knows every rivet in it, every seam, every weak point. She can handle it like a living thing, like a friend you've known forever. She can read the waves like a book, understands their language, their rhythms. She can predict what the sea will do, can sense where the dangers lie. She showed you the buoys when your little boat went out into the rough, churning sea, into the darkness. There are dozens of them scattered about, arranged in different patterns that form an invisible map only Hannah and the ships understand. Each buoy has a number, a system that only experienced captains know, a kind of secret language between the sea and mankind, between the safe harbor and the wide world. Hannah could identify each one at a glance, even in foul weather, even in rain and thick snow and spray. She knew at once if its lamp was burning, if the bell was ringing, whether the colors were still bright and visible or faded by storm and salt water. She knew their voices, their rhythms, their weaknesses, their souls. When a buoy is damaged, when it's slipped from position, or when the light's gone out, Hannah must go out and repair it, restore it. It's hard and dangerous work. especially in winter when the sea is furious and knows no mercy. She must reach the buoy, which means her boat has to draw close, sometimes just centimeters from the rocks. She must tie it fast with hooks, check it over, change the lamps with freezing hands, refresh the paint with quick movements. Sometimes one buoy takes her a whole day, sometimes just an hour. It depends on the weather and the grace of the sea. She told you of a night when a great storm came, one of the worst she'd ever seen. The buoys were thrown about in disorder, and Hannah knew that if they weren't repaired at once, there'd be a disaster. A large ship was in the area, and if the lights weren't burning, if the buoys weren't in their places, that ship would hit the rocks. She went out on a night when the sea was black and you couldn't see the waves. You could only feel them tossing the boat about, only feel the spray washing over the cabin. She worked all night long, alone, with her tools, repairing every buoy that was damaged. The next morning, a ship came past, a large cargo vessel with hundreds of people aboard. The captain called in person to thank her. He said that without the buoys, without the light, his ship would have run onto the rocks, would have sunk, that everyone aboard would have died. The captain's voice trembled with gratitude and emotion. Hannah said, "That's the best reward you can get in this work." A few sincere, grateful words from someone who's still alive because you did your job, because you stayed faithful at your post. She's solitary in her work, quite alone on this island, far from the world, far from human voice and human company. But she says she's not lonely, that loneliness is a luxury for others, not for her. She has the buoys, the ships, the sea, and that's everything. The sea is her companion, she says, sometimes hostile, sometimes kind, but always present, always reliable. The buoys are her family, and the ships are her relations, all over the world, sailing and trusting in the lights. The wind howls past your window at this moment, for it's winter and the sea is rough. Hannah will go out in her little boat, and she'll check the buoys, and she'll make sure the lights are burning. She'll do it without glory, without recognition, just because it must be done, just because people are on the sea who depend on her light. Hannah told you that she can never be quite sure her work is done well enough, that it's not simply not bad, that she's getting everything right. But she does it anyway, year after year, winter after winter, day after day, with dedication and love. She'll keep doing it until she can't any longer, until her hands are too weak, until her eyes can no longer see the sea. It's her calling. It's her life. It's her quiet promise to the sea and to all the people who sail upon it, in darkness and danger. The lights burn every night, the bells ring, and Hannah watches over them like a mother over her children. She'll never be famous, will never have monuments, will never be in the newspapers. But somewhere out there, on a ship in the night, a captain will see a light and be grateful it's there. Grateful that someone ensures the lights keep burning. You sit in the train, and as you travel back towards Emden, you think of Hannah heading out to sea, into the darkness, with her lamp, bringing light. It's quiet work, unnoticed and unthankful, but as necessary as breathing. Sink down now, as the buoys sink into the deep water. The sea rocks you, The wind sings your lullaby. The lights lead you into the darkness of good sleep. Rest yourself. Trust the lights. Trust the night. My eyes grew heavy, so very heavy, as though someone had gently laid a warm hand across my eyelids and said, "Now it's good. Now it's enough for today." And I heard the train, clack, 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 clack. And I heard the quiet breathing of another passenger already asleep. And I heard the distant rush of wind against the window panes. And all these sounds were like a soft blanket laid over me, layer upon layer, warmth upon warmth, until I felt nothing but the smooth glide of the train through the night. And as the train carried on through the night, clack, 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 I felt my thoughts growing slower, the images in my head growing softer, the edges blurring. The voices I'd heard became a gentle humming, a hum like distant bees, or like an old song you heard as a child and can't quite remember now. The warm air in the compartment wrapped around me like a blanket, and I felt my shoulders slowly sink down, felt the tension of the day drop away from me, piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without haste, without sorrow. Picture yourself sitting on a clear spring morning on the train from St. Pölten to Krems, and beside you, a botanist with a well-worn notebook. Her eyes shine as the first light falls through the beech forests of the Waldviertel. Her name is Maria, and for 30 years she's been mapping the forest clearings in springtime. On this morning, as we travel through the Moostal, she tells you about the cuckoo flowers sprouting everywhere here. The name comes from the fact that these delicate lilac blossoms bloom precisely when the cuckoo returns to Europe. You'll know when you hear the cuckoo calling that the cuckoo flowers are out, she says quietly. The train slows a little, and Maria points out the window. There, on a forest clearing between damp little streams still brimming with snowmelt, they bloom. Hundreds of small flowers like lilac stars on rich green ground. Maria plans to map this clearing today, record its height, measure the soil's moisture, document the neighboring plants. She says that each clearing has its own story, its own personality. Maria leans towards you and whispers as though the meadows could hear. 10 years ago, this clearing was much smaller, just a few shy cuckoo flowers. But I watched how the forest changed, how the trees grew older, how the light shifted. And every year there were more flowers. Now it's one of the richest clearings in all the Waldviertel. Nature has time, she says, infinite time. But if you watch long enough, you see how everything changes. You ask her how long it takes to truly understand a clearing. She laughs softly, a tender laugh like leaves rustling. Longer than a lifetime, she says. But that's the beauty. You're never finished. You'll always see more if you just look. A botanist, Maria says, is like a monk in a monastery. He devotes his life to one thing, a single, marvelous thing. And that thing reveals itself more and more deeply the longer you work with it. A forest clearing is an entire universe, if you see it properly. There are fungi under the earth, the great networks that bind everything together. There are insects, spiderwebs, seeds, roots. A botanist sees all this, and in time becomes part of it, becomes the clearing itself. As the train rolls on, Maria speaks of the other spring bloomers awakening now in these forests. The wood anemone, so white and delicate as snow, but growing only in old, unploughed forests. That's a sign of continuity, she says. These flowers tell you this forest is at least 400 years old. You can read history in the plants if you understand them. There's also the erythronium, the dog's tooth lily with its curved red petals, and the hepatica, so blue as the March sky. Each has its place, its time, its role in this grand concert of spring. And Maria, she knows them all like a mother knows her children. The damp earth of the forest clearings smells of decay and new life at once. It's a scent Maria has known since childhood, the smell of humus releasing minerals as the snowdrops and fritillaries melt. Maria says that scent is the scent of time itself. Every spring, when it comes, she knows something new is beginning. That life is stronger than frost, that hope is stronger than fear, and that it's worth being surprised anew every spring. Under the trees, the ants are active again, little workers stirring their armies after winter has held them still. They march in ordered columns, each ant knowing exactly where it is and what it must do. It's an example of order in nature, Maria says, of a community working together. And if we humans would learn from the ants, the world would be a better place. Maria tells you of a woodpecker she heard yesterday. A green woodpecker calling out its characteristic laugh. "Cue, cue, cue," like an echo of madness, she says. The fresh light breaking between the budding beech branches cast dappled patterns across the forest clearing. Everything breathes here. Everything wakes. She says the woodpecker is a sign. When the green woodpecker returns, then spring has truly come. The woodpecker's laugh is like a welcome greeting, a blessing on the new blossoms and the new life coming from the earth. You feel your eyes growing heavier as the train's rhythm rocks you. The first beech bud you see through the window is still closed, but in a few days, perhaps in just a few hours, thousands will burst open into that softest, brightest green that exists. It's the green of hope. Maria has explained to you that beech buds are so intelligent. They wait for the right temperature, the right light. They're not blind to when it's time. They can feel it. The buds have a memory, an inner knowledge, and this knowledge passes from generation to generation, tree to tree, like a great living network of information. Maria continues speaking, her voice growing softer. She speaks of a particular year, 1987, when late winter weather destroyed all the flowers in the forest clearing. She drove out with her team and found nothing but shattered stems and frozen leaves. But just 2 weeks later, with new warmth, the cuckoo flowers returned. They'd sent up new stems, formed new blossoms. Nature has its strategies, Maria says, its ways of surviving. The most important thing is never to give up, always to come back and look. Every spring new, every spring a new adventure. Maria continues writing in her notebook, her pen scratching softly on paper. Observations, measurements, sketches. She asks if you'd like to learn to see like a botanist. It's not about knowledge, she says, but about slowing down enough to notice what lies before you. A forest clearing is not merely a collection of plants. It's an archive of time, a book written in leaves and stems and roots that rewrites itself each year. And if you turn the pages, you'll understand that you yourself are part of this book too. That every person who looks at a forest clearing for the first time and stops in wonder, that person writes a new chapter in that clearing's history. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the damp forest air. You can smell it, this earth just waking. Maria has given you a special gift during this brief journey. The understanding that nature doesn't stay silent, but sings. It sings its story in every petal, every bud, every stem. And if you listen long enough, you'll understand that melody. The earth of the Waldviertel carries millions of years of history within it. The forest clearings are only the uppermost layer, the visible layer. Beneath lie other times, other forests, other flowers. But everything is connected. Everything is part of one great, endless story. The train approaches Krems, and the forest clearing disappears from view. But Maria promises you that tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, you'll be here again, at least in spirit. The cuckoo flowers will bloom, the cuckoo will call, and the earth will wake. Maria has given you everything she could give, her passion, her patience, her love for the small things that hold the world together. And you know you'll carry that passion with you, that you'll never walk through a forest clearing quite the same way. You'll slow down. You'll see. Your eyelids sink. The botanist has written a new chapter in her notebook, and you're writing a new chapter in your dream. The forest clearings of the Waldviertel lead you slowly into a gentle sleep, where the flowers glow and time stands still. In your dream, you become part of the clearing. You grow as a cuckoo flower, your roots deep in the damp earth of the Waldviertel. And Maria watches you through her lens. You are part of her story, and she is part of yours. Sleep now. The cuckoo flowers guard your sleep, and the Waldviertel forest keeps your dreams warm. The train rolls out from Limburg, and you sit beside a woman whose camera is older than her wedding photograph. Her name is Greta, and she photographs dewdrops. Not landscapes, not portraits, not the great moments, just dewdrops. For 40 years, Greta wakes at 3:30 in the morning, packs her old Leica and her tripod legs in a rucksack, and walks out to the meadows of the Westerwald. The train to Montabaur is an extended night for her, she says, a kind of preparation for what's to come. You ask what's so fascinating about them. Dewdrops are everywhere, aren't they? She smiles, and in that smile lies the patience of a woman who has learned to see the world differently. A dewdrop, she says, is never the same anywhere. Each is different. Each is a little lens that bends the light differently, that reflects a different piece of the world. Greta tells how for a long time she didn't know what to focus on. She was an artist, experimenting with different media, until one morning, quite by chance, she photographed a dewdrop It wasn't planned, wasn't conscious. But in that moment, she understood. That's it. That's my language. Since then, there's been nothing but dewdrops, and with each drop, she discovers the world anew. As the train travels through the first grey dawns of the Westerwald, Greta shows you a book of her photographs. You see the images, and suddenly you understand. A dewdrop on a blade of grass isn't a simple drop of water. It's a universe. In a single drop, the sun reflects before it rises over the horizon. In another, you see a perfect miniature image of the surrounding meadow. It's the whole world compressed into 2 millimeters. Greta shows you a page she particularly loves. A dewdrop in which a tree is reflected. It took her hours to find it, she says. But when she finally saw it through the viewfinder, it was like a revelation. A tree in a drop. The world in a lie. Infinity in the smallest thing. Greta tells you of the first meadow where she photographed dewdrops 40 years ago. It was a spring like this one. The earth was damp, the air still cool, and everything was possible. She's made tens of thousands of photographs since, and not one is like another. Not one repeats a beauty she'd seen before. Her children, she says quietly, never understood. Why always dewdrops, Mama? Why not ordinary people, ordinary moments? But Greta told them there are no ordinary moments. That every moment, every second contains beauty if you only look carefully. Perhaps her children never grasped it, but she, Greta, she's content with this. She'll grow old with it, and in the end, the pictures will remain, long after she's gone. The train slows its pace, as though the locomotive itself understands that speed isn't what matters here. The damp meadows of the Westerwald stretch beside the rails, and everywhere, you see the glitter. The dewdrops catch the first faint light rising above the budding beech forests. The wood anemones are in full bloom, little white stars in a sea of leaves still young and tender. Greta has her camera already in hand. She's nervous, not from fear, but from the excitement of an artist who knows these moments are rare. Dawn holds for no longer than a minute, she says. It's all about timing. You must be there when the light is perfect, when the drops are still complete, when the ants are just beginning their work, when the air is still silent. You ask if she ever photographs anything else. She shakes her head quietly. This was her first love, she says. These meadows, these dewdrops, this light. Everything else is distraction. And with each clearing, each meadow, each morning, you learn more about yourself. The dewdrops are like a mirror, except they don't show you who you are, but who you could become. The train rattles on, and Greta writes in her notebook. Weather forecast, wind conditions, soil moisture. She plans like a general, though she's only photographing dewdrops. But that's what makes you sleepy. This dedication to detail, this love for the small things others don't see. The beech buds are still tight, but in Greta's eyes, they're already open. She sees the future in that first tender green about to emerge from brown husks. She sees the new leaves, the insects that will come, the changing dewdrops that will adapt to faster evaporation as the light grows stronger. You notice your eyes growing heavier, but it's a good feeling. Greta's voice is like a stream running over stones, soothing and unstoppable. She speaks of a meadow she's photographed for 35 years. The anthill standing there is active again now. Black insects working feverishly to rebuild their colonies. And on each single ant, a dewdrop could fall. And that drop would tell the whole story of that ant's life. Greta shows you another photograph. It's not a single dewdrop, but thousands. A grass field completely covered in drops, glittering like millions of little jewels. She made this photograph on a morning so cold that the air shimmered. Frost had laid ice on the dewdrops overnight, and with the first sun, they began to melt, to sparkle. It was the image of awakening, Greta says, the world reinventing itself. An hour later, it was all gone, all evaporated. That's why I must wake so early, she says. Because beauty is fleeting. Because the world opens for only a few minutes each morning. She tells of how important the Leica is. With a digital camera, Greta says, you'd take 100 photographs and choose one at the end. But with the Leica, where film costs money, you must think, you must wait, you must hit exactly the right moment. And that makes the pictures more beautiful. That makes them real. Patience is the best camera, Greta says. And the best camera forces you towards patience. She's had this Leica for over 30 years. It's scratched, worn, partly rusty. But it works. And it works better than many new cameras. The optics are unchanged. There's no autofocus, no digital aid. It's simply you and the light and the world. And that's exactly why she loves this camera. It forces you towards simplicity, towards truth. The train approaches Montabaur. Greta slowly packs away her camera, not hurriedly, but thoughtfully. She'll step out soon and walk to the meadows. The first light is just breaking through. The perfect moment is coming. She tells you it took years before she truly understood the language of dewdrops. At first, she thought it was about perfection, the best images. But later, she realized it wasn't about perfection, but truth. The beauty of imperfection. A dewdrop that's not perfectly round, that's a bit blurred by wind, that's sometimes more beautiful than the perfect one. Because it carries truth, fleetingness, fragility. That's real beauty. But as she's already leaving you, you feel you'll always see her still, in every meadow, in every dewdrop, in every moment where light breaks the world anew. Greta will accompany you in your dreams, with her Leica and her patience, and her love for the small things others overlook. Sleep now, and dream of light shining through small round windows. Dream of meadows in the grey dawn, where the world is still whole, still entirely new. The dewdrops keep your dreams warm and especially clear. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I thought still, other people sleep now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them, and the moon looks down on us, and everything is in its place. The fields are in their place, the forests are in their place, the rivers are in their place, and I am in my place, here in this carriage, Here in this warm cradle of wood and cloth and metal, carrying me where I need to go, without my having to stay awake, without my having to do anything but trust and rest. You sit on the train from Arnsberg to Winterberg, and beside you a woman with green eyes and drone batteries in her bag. Her name is Claudia, and she rescues fawns. Not for romantic reasons, but practical ones. In May and June, when the spring meadows of Sauerland are mown, newborn roe deer fawns hide tight to the ground, utterly motionless, to stay invisible. It's a strategy that's worked for 1,000 years, but the mowing machines have grown faster, louder, and the farmers can't see the camouflaged animals. So Claudia comes with her drone, and she searches. You ask how often she manages to save them. Her gaze turns serious. Often enough, she says, but not often enough. Just this week I found 36 fawns in one meadow, and we saved every one before the machine came. But last week, in the next village over, we missed 6. The machine was faster. She tells you she's started a petition, an appeal to the farmers to begin their mowing later, to search the meadows first. Some farmers have understood. They come to her and ask, "Would you like to check the meadow first?" And Claudia comes with her drone and searches. Those are the good moments. Those are the moments when she sees people understand. Claudia also has a partner, she says, who helps her. A young man from the area who's as skilled with the drone as she is. Together they form a team, a kind of rescue team for the fawns. They train together, they plan together, they drive together over the meadows. And always, before they find a fawn, they speak with its mother. They speak with nature, they say. "We're coming to help. We promise we'll bring the fawn back safely." It's almost like a ritual, and Claudia says she believes the mothers understand. Claudia shows you the drone. It's not large, not impressive, but its infrared camera can see the body heat of the fawns. Even when they're so motionless, they seem invisible. The drone cost Claudia more than 1,000 euros, but every fawn she saves, every early morning before the farmers fire up their machines, it's worth it. The train rolls through the damp forests of Sauerland. The beeches are just beginning to put out their tender green, and in the undergrowth, snowdrops still lie, fading. The streams are swollen with meltwater. The damp earth smells of decay and new life. Here, in these forests, the does will have their fawns, and here, on these meadows, they'll hide them. Claudia tells you of a fawn she rescued 2 years ago. It was a warm May morning, and the machine was already standing in the meadow. She sent the drone up, and there it was, a tiny roe deer fawn with red and white speckled fur, completely motionless. She ran over, quickly packed the fawn in a warm box with her hands, and carried it to the forest edge. The mother must have watched the whole time without moving. An hour later, after the meadow was mown, she laid the fawn back down. The mother came, sniffed, recognized the scent again, and took her baby back. "That was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen," Claudia says quietly. The train rolls through the damp forests of Sauerland. Claudia shows you a map where all the meadows are marked that she'll check this year. There are more than 50. 50 meadows where drones will fly, where fawns will be searched for, where lives will be saved. It's a map of hope, Claudia says. Each marking is a promise to nature that there are people who don't just take, but give, who don't just use, but protect. And if you bring all these meadows together, you see a great network of protection, a great network of people who've understood that nature is our responsibility. You notice your eyes growing heavier as you listen to Claudia. Her voice is like a melody, calm and steady, and the story of the fawn wraps around you like a blanket. The thought that there are people like Claudia who wake before sunrise, before the farmers fire up their machines, just to save small lives that would otherwise be lost. That's a kind of beauty you don't often see. And as you listen, you forget the train, forget the noise, forget time. You're only with Claudia and the fawns in the meadows of Sauerland, where lives are saved, where hope is still possible. Nature is rough and wild, yes, but it's also fragile, and it takes people like Claudia to understand that point, to work to ensure that fragility is protected, that small lives are respected, that the drone isn't a tool of destruction, but a tool of rescue. Claudia tells of her first rescue 10 years ago. Then she had no drone, only her eyes. She'd walked slowly across the meadows, searching until she'd spotted one of the fawns with her bare eyes. It was a moment of intersection where nature and technology meet. She took the fawn and carried it to the forest edge whilst the machine was already working in the meadow. Since then, she's understood it's possible, that you can save lives if you're only quick enough and brave enough. Claudia shows you a photo on her camera, a tiny fawn motionless in its hiding place, the white blaze clearly visible. The drone was only 2 meters above it, and the fawn had no idea it was there. The infrared camera distinguished its warmer body surface from the cooler grass, and suddenly it was no longer invisible. Suddenly, it was seen. She also shows you a video where the fawn is brought back to its mother after rescue. The mother, who must have been near all along, comes at once and licks the fawn. It's a moment full of gratitude, unspoken but clear. She says it doesn't always work. Sometimes the fawns can't be reached in time. Sometimes the drone doesn't arrive in time. Sometimes the mother is gone and the fawn is lost. But every single fawn you can save counts. That's the only thing that matters. The train slows as it approaches Winterberg. The forests grow thicker, and between the budding beech branches you see the first woodpeckers, black and white with red crowns, searching for insects just waking from their winter sleep. The ants are everywhere active again, little black work crews hurrying over the damp earth. Claudia says that tomorrow morning, while it's still dark, she'll go out with her drone over the meadows of Sauerland. The fawns will be there, motionless and invisible to everyone but those willing to see them. And she'll find them, and she'll save them. It's not spectacular, it's not famous, but it matters. You feel tiredness take hold of you, gently and gradually. The story of the fawns lulls you to sleep. The image of these small, fragile creatures hidden in the green meadows whilst the sun rises and the world wakes. And Claudia with her drone, like an angel in green, making the impossible possible. The train stops in Winterberg, but in your dreams, you and Claudia travel on, across the meadows of Sauerland, across green fields full of hidden lives, full of tender fawns waiting for rescue and mothers guarding them. Sleep now. The fawns are safe. Claudia watches over them, and the drone will find them all. Sleep and dream of tender hooves and white-spotted fur, of early mornings when the world is still silent and rescue is possible. And so we traveled on, the train and I and the few other passengers sharing the compartment or in the neighboring ones, each in their own small corner of the world, each on their own journey into sleep. The warmth of the carriage, the quiet crackle of the heating, the clicking of the wheels on the points, all this became a shared song, a song without words, a song that carries you and soothes you and says, you may let go now, you may rest now. The train travels on for you, time travels on for you, the world looks after itself whilst you sleep. And as the train carried on through the night, clack, 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 I felt my thoughts growing slower, the images in my head growing softer, the edges blurring. The voices I'd heard became a gentle humming, a hum like distant bees, or like an old song you heard as a child and can't quite remember now. The warm air in the compartment wrapped around me like a blanket, and I felt my shoulders slowly sink down, felt the tension of the day drop away from me piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without haste, without sorrow.